My name is Eleanor Hart. I am 23 years old, and the day of my college graduation was supposed to be one of the most beautiful memories of my life. But for my family, even that day turned into a cruel test of love and favoritism. On the crowded campus, with cheers filling the air, in front of friends, professors, and relatives, my parents stepped forward and handed my twin sister, Emily, a luxurious box. Inside was the key to a brand new house, a reward for this special child. As for me, the one who had worked tirelessly to pay my own tuition, I received a thin envelope. When I opened it, my heart sank. It was nothing but a lottery ticket. My mother smiled as if it were some harmless little joke and told me to try your luck, maybe it will change your life. Emily laughed mockingly, saying I was better suited for chance than for carrying any real responsibility. I forced back my tears, but inside, my heart shattered into pieces. What they did not realize was that the very ticket they dismissed would become the doorway that changed my entire life. I want to tell you everything, from my unfair childhood to the moment I stood tall and spoke the words that left my whole family speechless. But before I dive deeper into the story, let me ask you one thing. Where are you listening from today? I grew up in a family that looked perfect from the outside. We had a 2-story house with a white picket fence in Columbus, Ohio, a small front garden filled with roses that my mother tended to daily, and a bright living room lined with family portraits covering every wall. But only those inside knew that the picture was far from balanced. Within that house, I was always the shadow, while my twin sister Emily was placed high on the pedestal of admiration. From an early age, I could see how favoritism ran through every dinner, every gift, every word of praise that my parents gave us. Emily and I looked so much alike that outsiders often struggled to tell us apart. We shared the same bright brown eyes, long chestnut hair, and the gentle smile we inherited from our mother. But the resemblance ended at appearances. In my parents' eyes, Emily was the light, and I was only the background that made that light shine brighter. My mother, Linda, was constantly busy polishing Emily's image, taking her to dance lessons, piano classes, and foreign language courses while I was left behind to set the dinner table, mop the floors, or handle whatever chores needed to be done. My father, Richard, always boasted that Emily was the hope of the family, the one who would carry the Hart name far. But when it came to me, he would just shake his head, half joking and half serious, saying I was too stubborn, always wanting to do things my own way without anyone's help. I remember vividly the Christmases of my childhood. Our tree always sparkled with twinkling lights, and underneath it lay boxes of gifts in every shape and color. Emily always got to open the biggest box. When she was 8, my parents gave her a brand new pink bicycle, the paint still fresh and shining. I received a bike too, but it was an old hand-me-down from a cousin, repainted to look somewhat new. When I asked why, my mother only smiled and said, "You're the older sister, you have to give way. Your sister needs more so she can shine." That answer repeated itself like a broken record until I knew every word by heart. Birthdays were no different. Emily always had grand parties with 3-tier cakes, colorful balloons, and a house full of friends. I was made to share the party with her, but my name on the cake was always squeezed into some tiny corner, sometimes even hidden beneath the glowing candles reserved for Emily. My gifts were usually second-hand books, a discounted doll, or sometimes nothing more than a casual happy birthday. Meanwhile, my sister received sparkling princess dresses, brand new roller skates, or the iPod I had once dreamed of but never touched. Family dinners were another stage where favoritism played out. My parents always turned to Emily, asking about school, praising every A, every small award. When I tried to share that I had scored high on an essay, my father would nod dismissively and then quickly switch the subject back to Emily's latest sports achievements. I still remember one Thanksgiving when the whole family gathered. My father raised his glass and proudly spoke of Emily's music award, while I sat there, spoon in hand, serving mashed potatoes, feeling invisible. I was not a child without feelings. I noticed. I remembered. And I endured it quietly. I still smiled, still tried to behave, but inside, Every small wound slowly turned into scars. Many times I asked my mother, "Why does Emily always get more?" She never hesitated, answering with chilling ease. "Because she's more special." Those words cut into me like a cold blade. More special, and what about me? What was I in their eyes but a faded shadow? When I was 12, our class was asked to bring new school supplies for the coming year. Emily was given a designer purple backpack stuffed with fresh notebooks, rulers, and pencils. I had only my old, worn-out bag with yellowed paper notebooks and a few cheap promotional pens. I quietly pushed it under my desk, hoping no one would notice, but inside, I burned with shame. That night, I asked my mother once more why things had to be so different. Her answer was the same as always. "You're the older sister, you have to give way. Your sister deserves more." So, I learned silence. I learned to swallow the bitterness of unfairness, because whenever I spoke up, my father would shout that I was selfish, that I didn't care for my sister. Emily never missed a chance to mock me either, often shrugging and saying, "You should be used to it by now. You'll never get more than me." To her, it was a joke, but to me, it was a cruel truth. That was my childhood, a chain of days spent in the shadows, always told to be more understanding, to endure more, while my twin sister was spoiled and protected like a precious jewel. I still remember the feeling of sitting alone in a dark room, clutching an old book to my chest, whispering to myself that one day I would break free from this cycle of favoritism. But back then, I was just a child, not yet aware that these wounds would follow me into adulthood, only to erupt years later on the very day of my graduation, the day I should have finally been celebrated like anyone else. When we entered high school, the differences between Emily and me became clearer than ever. It was the time when most kids started to build their own independence, but for us, it was the time when the gap created by our parents' favoritism grew wider and wider. I still remember Emily's 16th birthday. While friends and neighbors gathered in our yard, my father suddenly rolled out a brand new red car, still carrying the scent of fresh paint. The crowd erupted in cheers. Emily threw her arms around our parents, tears streaming down her face from happiness. And I stood there, clapping for her, trying to hide the bitterness rising in my chest. Because just a few days later, when my own 16th birthday arrived, the only gift I received was a new backpack bought from a discount store. My transportation to school was still the same old bus, which meant waking up at 5 in the morning to catch the first ride. I still remember those freezing Ohio mornings, the wind slicing through my skin as I shivered at the bus stop, while Emily leisurely drove out of the garage, music blasting, waving goodbye. High school was a string of days in which I had to learn how to adapt to the unfairness. While Emily attended extra classes in piano, art, and sports, I was usually at home helping my mother clean or taking on odd jobs to earn a little spending money. Still, I did not give up. I studied hard, found joy in the pages of my books, and discovered a quiet pride in the independence of carving my own path, even if it was full of obstacles. My teachers often praised me for being bright and diligent, but in my parents' eyes, those words never echoed as loudly as Emily's sports trophies or the glossy photos of her social events. By the time we both entered college, the gap was no longer just material, it was an entire difference in worldview. Emily and I were both admitted to a university in New York. I chose communications, while Emily pursued business management. From the very beginning, my parents announced that they would cover all of Emily's tuition and living expenses because they believed she was worth the investment to succeed. As for me, my father said bluntly, "You're independent, you're good at handling things yourself. FAFSA and scholarships should be enough." And so I was thrown into a whirlwind of debt and part-time jobs. I filled out FAFSA forms, applied for scholarships, and worked at the university library. By day, I attended classes. By night, I shelved books, manned the front desk, and even emptied trash bins. Those nights were long. I would type away at essays, then collapse at the desk, tears slipping down my face with no one to tell. Meanwhile, Emily lived like a little princess in the heart of the city. She had her own apartment, rented by our parents, and they sent her monthly allowances without fail. On weekends, I saw her photos on Instagram dressed in glamorous outfits, a cocktail in hand, her smile shining among her friends at lavish parties. And me? On those same weekends, I was working the night shift at a small diner near campus. I washed dishes until my hands cracked, the smell of grease clinging to me. When the customers finally left, I would sink into a chair in the kitchen, tilt my head back to the stained ceiling, and whisper to myself, "Do my parents even realize I'm just trying to survive each day?" Late at night in the dorm, when my roommate was already fast asleep, I would still be hunched over my old laptop, typing away, my eyes swollen from crying and studying at the same time. There were moments when I felt so hopeless I wanted to give up entirely, but then I would remember that little girl I once was sitting in a dark room, clutching an old book to her chest, whispering to herself, "One day, I'll escape this favoritism." That memory pulled me back to my feet. It reminded me that I could not collapse. I had to prove my worth not to my parents, but to myself. Emily's experience was the complete opposite. For her, college was like a never-ending festival. I once overheard her bragging that she had never worried about money in her life, that whenever she ran out, all it took was one phone call and mom would immediately transfer more. The exams I studied for until exhaustion, Emily prepared for with private tutors paid for by our parents. She joined student clubs, went on weekend trips, and attended glamorous galas. My weekends, meanwhile, were spent working late-night shifts, barely catching restless naps at the library desk between assignments. The comparison stared me in the face every single day. Some mornings, as I dragged myself out of the library after a night shift, my eyes bloodshot, I would see Emily and her friends strutting by, dressed to the nines, ready for yet another party. Emily would glance at me, throw a half-smile that stung more than words, and keep walking. Shame and anger would rise in me, but I kept my head down and moved forward, because deep down I knew my path would never be the same as hers. I survived those years with a resilience I didn't even know I possessed. Yes, I cried countless times. There were nights when my pillow was soaked with tears, but every morning I still got up, stepped outside, and kept fighting. I believed, with everything in me, that one day all of this effort would be worth it. I silently promised myself that no matter what, I would not let my family's favoritism define who I was. Those years of youth carved a harsh lesson into me. Some people are given a red carpet from the start, while others must hack through thorns to clear their own way. Emily had a car, endless parties, and parents backing her at every turn. I had freezing bus rides, endless dishwashing shifts, and long nights clinging to my laptop until dawn. But it was those very hardships that forged my strength. I did not yet realize that later, on the very day of my graduation, the unfairness would rise to the surface more vividly than ever before and become the final drop that overflowed the glass, pushing me toward a turning point that would change my entire life. My college graduation day arrived after 4 long years of juggling classes, jobs, and the crushing weight of being forgotten in my own family. I had always told myself this moment would be a milestone worth every sacrifice, the one day when my parents would finally see me as their child no less worthy than Emily. I believed that after all those years of watching me pay my tuition, earn my own money, and take care of myself, they would at least give me fair recognition. I didn't dream of a house. I didn't dream of a luxury car. I only hoped for a gift with genuine meaning, a sincere word of praise, or simply a warm embrace from my parents, something that would show me they were proud of me too. That morning, the sky over New York was strikingly clear. Golden sunlight poured over the campus lawn, where hundreds of students in black gowns and square caps gathered. The ceremonial music rang out brightly, blending with the cheers of friends and families. The air was thick with joy and celebration. I stepped out from the rows of seats, my heart racing, my hands trembling as I reached for my diploma. 4 years of struggle, the long nights washing dishes, the drowsy mornings in the library, all of it came rushing back in that single moment. I smiled, believing that at last I would be seen as equal to Emily. When the ceremony ended, students flooded the campus lawn to find their loved ones. I scanned the crowd and spotted my parents and Emily standing under the shade of a maple tree. They held 2 gift boxes, wrapped in glossy paper with bright red ribbons. I walked quickly toward them, my heart swelling with hope that this time I would be honored just as much as my sister. My mother handed Emily the larger box first. Emily tore it open, and gasps erupted around us as the metallic glint of keys caught the sunlight. They were keys to a brand new house, purchased by my parents as her graduation gift. Emily screamed with joy, throwing her arms around them, her face glowing like a star stepping onto a red carpet. My parents beamed, their eyes brimming with pride. I stood beside them, waiting for my turn, my heart pounding with anticipation. Then my mother turned to me and handed me a small envelope. Surprised, I opened it, still clinging to the hope that inside I would find a heartfelt letter, or at least a small contribution to my future. But when I saw the lone lottery ticket inside, my chest constricted as though gripped by iron. I looked up, eyes wide, my voice shaking. "Mom, it's really just a lottery ticket?" My mother smiled, completely oblivious to the humiliation in my eyes, and said lightly, "Try your luck, sweetheart. You never know, maybe it'll change your life." Her words landed like a cold slap across my face. Change my life? After 4 years of proving I could stand on my own, was that not enough to show them I was worthy already? Emily sneered, her mocking voice carrying in front of friends and relatives. "You're better suited for luck than responsibility. Houses, investments, the future, that's my job. You just stick with lottery tickets. Who knows, maybe you'll win someday." Laughter erupted around her, and I felt my face burn hot with shame and pain. My father, as if to end the tension, patted my shoulder lightly, but his words fell heavy as lead. "You've always been strong, independent, that ticket suits you." I bit down so hard on my lip I nearly drew blood. In that instant, every expectation I had held shattered into pieces. I forced myself to hold back tears, to stand tall in the crowd. I didn't want my friends or professors to see me break. But inside, I had gone silent. I remembered every night I studied until 3 in the morning, every penny scraped together from long shifts, every time my mother told me, "You have to give way for your sister." And now, on the very day I was supposed to be acknowledged, I was humiliated publicly with nothing but a lottery ticket. Emily kept clinging to our parents, flaunting the keys to her new house, posing for photos, her smile bright and flawless, while I stood there on the sidelines like a stranger. Some of my classmates glanced at me with pity, while others whispered to each other. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, but my throat tightened until no words could come out. All I felt was the sting of 100 needles piercing straight into my heart. In that moment, a bitter truth settled over me. In my parents' eyes, I had never been a worthy child. The fact that I could stand on my own, provide for myself, only meant to them that I didn't need or deserve anything from them. Emily, the special daughter, was always the one worthy of every sacrifice, every investment. I folded the lottery ticket, slipped it into my pocket, and forced a strained smile so as not to cause a scene in the crowd. But inside, I had completely fallen apart. That was the moment I realized fairness from my parents would never come. And in that instant, a deep fracture split wide in the family bond that had already been fragile for years, a fracture that nothing could ever repair. I turned away, searching for a quiet corner to breathe, but Emily's laughter and my parents' praises still echoed behind me like knives twisting deeper into my chest. I knew from that day forward, I would never look at my family the same way again. What I couldn't have imagined was that the very lottery ticket they treated like a joke would become the turning point that changed everything. After graduation, I didn't return to Ohio with my family as they expected. Deep down, I knew that house was no longer a home, but a monument to favoritism and scars that would never heal. Instead, I packed my few belongings and rented a tiny apartment in Brooklyn, New York. It was less than 400 square feet, the walls faded and peeling, the ceiling stained with watermarks, and the single window looked out onto a narrow alleyway. But to me, it was the first place where I truly felt free, a space where every square inch was paid for with my own sweat and effort. I started working part-time at a small marketing firm as an administrative assistant. The pay wasn't much, just enough to cover rent, utilities, and some groceries. Each morning, I squeezed into the subway with the rush hour crowd, heading to the office, and came home late when the city lights were already glowing. I sat at a desk by the window, entering data, editing documents, sometimes brewing coffee for the team. There were days I felt utterly exhausted, but I kept going because it was the only job that allowed me to survive in this expensive city. Meanwhile, my parents hardly ever called. The rare conversations were brief and impersonal. "Are you doing well?" Quickly followed by, "Emily's doing great, did you see her pictures on Facebook?" On my mother's profile, the updates were endless: Emily in her new house, Emily in elegant dresses, Emily at parties, Emily with her achievements. Each photo was captioned with words like, "So proud of our little girl." I saw it all, but never once did they mention me. It was as if I had vanished from the family portrait they presented to the world. The lottery ticket they gave me on graduation day still sat inside its envelope, tucked away in the drawer of my small apartment desk. I never threw it out, but I never once thought about checking the numbers either. To me, it was nothing more than a cruel joke, a clear reminder that my parents believed I deserved only luck, while everything certain and valuable was always reserved for Emily. Every time my eyes landed on that envelope, a lump rose in my throat, as if a voice inside whispered, "Maybe you'll never be the daughter they wanted." I remember coming home after long workdays to an apartment so quiet I could hear the ticking of the wall clock. I would lie on the old bed I bought from a secondhand shop, staring up at the stained ceiling. In my ears still echoed Emily's laughter from graduation day, my mother's soft voice saying, "Try your luck, sweetheart." I once believed that earning a degree, standing on stage to receive my diploma amidst applause, would finally earn me their recognition. But no, even then, they didn't see me as something to be proud of. Often, on my way home, I would see families out together, parents holding their children's hands on the way to dinner, or sitting in cafes with eyes glowing with pride as they looked at their kids. And I would wonder, why had I never known that feeling? What had I done wrong to always be pushed to the back, for the love that should have been shared equally to lean so heavily toward my sister? That question gnawed at me, leaving me in tears on countless nights, crying silently into my pillow as if it were the only pair of arms I could cling to. Sometimes I tried to call home, hoping to hear even a single word of genuine concern. But those calls never lasted long. My mother would cut in to brag that Emily had been invited to a conference, or to gush about her new designer dress. My father would ask just one question, "Is your job going well?" But his voice was distant, distracted, as if the question itself was only a formality. Over time, I realized that the more I reached for their care, the more their indifference pushed me away. One night, when I opened the fridge and found only a nearly expired carton of milk and a small piece of cheese, I sank into a chair and let out a bitter laugh. I remembered our kitchen back home, always overflowing with food, but where Emily was always served the choicest portions. I was always the one eating last, scraping what was left. Now, in this unfamiliar city, with nothing but a scrap of cheese, at least it belonged to me. No one could take it away. I began keeping a journal, writing down every thought, every pain, every dream I hadn't dared to speak aloud. I wrote so I wouldn't forget who I was, so I wouldn't be erased by the invisibility my family had imposed on me. And in page after page, I always circled back to one question. If I didn't have this family, who would I become? Perhaps those lonely days taught me the most important lesson of all. I came to understand that love from parents doesn't always come the way we need it. Some families love their children only in the way they choose, not in the way their children truly need. And for me, that harsh truth had never been clearer. Still, I refused to let myself collapse. I kept waking up early, kept going to work, kept learning how to smile in the face of hardship. I knew that if I fell, no one would be there to lift me but myself. And I made a promise deep inside. Even if I never received full love from my parents, I would find my own worth, a worth no one could deny. I didn't yet know that the very lottery ticket I had dismissed as a cruel joke would one day open the door to an entirely different path, changing everything forever. About 6 months after graduation, while I was still struggling with my job at the small marketing company and my cramped apartment in Brooklyn, I unexpectedly received a call from my mother. Her voice over the phone carried the same familiar tone, half sweet, half commanding. "Eleanor, come home this weekend for dinner at Aunt Sophia's. The whole family has something important to announce." Aunt Sophia was my cousin's aunt in Columbus, the one with the spacious house where family gatherings were often held. I was taken aback, since it was rare for my parents to invite me back, but curiosity pushed me to reluctantly agree. The next day, I boarded a budget flight to Ohio. Aunt Sophia's house glowed with lights, the front yard laid out with a long table draped in white cloth, lanterns hanging low, casting a soft golden glow. I walked in to find everyone already seated around the table, laughter filling the air. Emily wore a tight red dress, exuding confidence, while my parents sat beaming on either side of her. As soon as I sat down, my mother raised her voice with a practiced warmth. "Today is a special day. We wanted to share this wonderful news with you. A win." I glanced around, waiting, a faint hope flickering inside me that perhaps, this time, they would think of me, offer me a word of congratulations, some form of recognition. But then my father cleared his throat and declared proudly, "We're going to sponsor Emily's entire wedding. A grand, luxurious celebration at the biggest 5-star hotel in the city, followed by a honeymoon in Hawaii. We'll cover every single expense." Applause broke out from a few relatives nearby. Emily beamed, leaning her head against our mother's shoulder, her voice sing-song and triumphant. "I knew you'd always support me. Thank you, Mom and Dad. I love you more than anyone in the world." I sat frozen, my fingers clutching the edge of the tablecloth, while a storm surged inside me. Images flashed through my mind, the years I had fought alone, drowning in student debt just to make it through college, the nights I ate instant noodles in a dim apartment while Emily basked in endless comfort. And now, here were my parents announcing they would spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on Emily's dream wedding when they had never once spared even a small gesture of support for me. I couldn't hold it in anymore. I lifted my head, my voice hoarse but firm. "When are you going to help me? Just once? Just one time?" The table fell silent for several seconds, as though no one could believe I had dared to speak those words. My father frowned, my mother shifted uncomfortably, and Emily quickly jumped in, her eyes gleaming with mockery. "Because you're not good enough to deserve help, Eleanor. Mom and Dad have no reason to invest in someone who isn't exceptional." Her words cut into me like a blade. My hands trembled against the table, my whole body shaking from anger and the weight of unspoken pain. I stared into her eyes, then turned to my parents. A strange calm washed over me, and my voice came out clear and unwavering. "Number. It's not because I'm not good enough. It's because I refuse to be blindly obedient like her. I don't know how to bow my head and play the princess in this family. But at least I know how to stand on my own 2 feet. I don't need anyone to buy happiness for me." "Oh." The entire table went silent. Emily's mouth hung open, my mother flinched, her eyes flashing with anger, while my father's face turned red as though I had humiliated him in front of the whole family. I could feel every gaze fixed on me, but, strangely, I felt no fear. On the contrary, a wave of relief spread through me, as if I had finally spoken aloud the words I had swallowed for more than 20 years. I slowly stood up. The screech of my chair dragging against the wooden floor echoed in the tense air. I placed my napkin neatly on the table, letting my eyes sweep across the relatives around me. Their expressions were a mixed shock, annoyance, even a few heads shaking in disapproval. I didn't add another word. I just gave a faint, bitter smile. Then I turned and walked straight out of that brightly lit room. No one rose to stop me, no one called after me, not a single hand reached out. The door closed behind me, shutting in the awkward laughter and hushed whispers. Outside, The Ohio night air bit cold against my face, yet my chest burned with heat. For the first time in my life, I had confronted them directly, no longer swallowing my pain in silence. I walked along the narrow path toward the parking lot, the dim streetlights stretching my shadow across the ground. Each step felt like cutting free from an invisible rope that had bound me for years. That night, I checked into a cheap motel and sat quietly in the small room, staring at the flickering neon sign outside the window. I didn't feel triumphant, nor happy, only a deep sadness and a hollow emptiness. Yet beneath it all, I sensed a tiny seed of freedom beginning to sprout. I had spoken, I had walked away. And I had no idea that soon, my life would shift in ways I couldn't imagine, all starting with the lottery ticket I had once thought of as nothing more than a cruel joke. When I returned from Ohio, I slipped back into the exhausting rhythm of New York. My little Brooklyn apartment was cramped and dim, but it was the only place that felt safe. At least there were no scornful glances from my sister or commanding voices from my parents. I spent my days working at the marketing firm, squeezing in extra freelance projects just to make ends meet. The room was always cluttered with books, papers, and clothes strewn everywhere. One weekend evening, I decided to clean up, hoping it might clear my mind as well. As I pulled open the desk drawer, I suddenly spotted the thin envelope wedged between old documents. My heart skipped. It was the envelope my mother had handed me on graduation day. Slowly, I opened it, and there it was, the lottery ticket, its edges yellowed with time. A bitter laugh escaped my lips. For months, I had almost forgotten it existed, treating it like a cruel reminder I refused to touch. But that night, for reasons I couldn't explain, I held it up, turning it over under the weak glow of the lamp. "Try your luck, sweetheart. You never know, maybe it'll change your life." My mother's voice echoed in my mind, each word sharp and mocking. I sighed, about to slip it back into the envelope when my eyes caught the string of numbers printed on it. A thought flickered in my mind. Why not check? Just once. At least then, I could finally close the door on this lingering wound. I opened my laptop and went to the official New York Lottery website. My hands trembled as I typed in the numbers. I wasn't expecting anything. I thought I'd just laugh and close the screen. But when the winning numbers appeared, my heart clenched. The first number matched. I frowned, thinking it was just a coincidence. Then the second number matched too. My breathing quickened, my eyes widening, my chest pounding. I whispered each number under my breath, comparing them one by one. The third, the fourth, the fifth, every single one matched. And when the final number lit up on the screen, I went completely numb. I held the ticket in my hand, unable to believe what I was seeing. Jackpot, $100 million. Everything around me seemed to freeze. The noise of cars outside, the clanging of pipes in the walls, they all faded into the distance. All I could hear was the thunderous pounding of my own heart. My hands shook so violently I almost dropped the ticket. Tears welled up and spilled hot down my cheeks. I broke into sobs, the sound echoing through my tiny apartment. My mind raced back to that graduation day, my mother handing me the envelope, her voice saying, "Try your luck, maybe it'll change your life." Emily's mocking laugh in front of our friends. My father's patronizing pat on my shoulder, mistaking disdain for encouragement. I had treated this ticket as a joke, as proof of how little they valued me. And yet, here it was, opening a door to an entirely new life. I sank onto the floor, clutching the ticket as tears blurred my vision, but inside I felt a clarity sharper than ever before. For years, I had fought to earn their recognition, to prove I was worthy of love. But in this single moment, I realized I didn't need them anymore. My life had changed, not because of their love or their investments, but because of the very thing they dismissed as worthless. Inside me, a voice rose, both aching and defiant. So it's the very thing they scorned that has given me a new life. I sat there for a long time, letting the emotions crash over me: shock, disbelief, joy, and a bittersweet ache. I understood then that $100 million wasn't just money. It was a chance to step out of the shadows, to truly take control of my destiny. More importantly, it was living proof that my worth had never rested in my parents' hands or in their favoritism toward Emily. My worth had always been in my resilience, my independence, and now, in this ticket they once tossed to me like a cruel joke. That night, I didn't sleep. I stared at the lottery ticket for hours, unable to take my eyes off those fateful numbers. 1,000 questions spun through my head. What would I do with this money? Should I share it with my family, or should I keep it for myself? The longer I thought, the more certain I became none of them deserved a single cent of it. This was my chance to rewrite my life, and it belonged to me alone. When dawn light seeped through the window, I rose and wiped away the last of my tears. I knew that from that moment on, everything had changed. Eleanor Hart, the daughter overlooked, dismissed, forgotten, would no longer live as a shadow. I had found my own path, beginning with the very lottery ticket my family had treated as a joke. But for me, it was nothing less than the ticket to a brand new life. After that fateful night, when I realized I was holding a ticket worth $100 million, I refused to let myself act impulsively. I understood all too well that money could be salvation, but it could also become a trap if I wasn't careful. My whole life I had been treated as if I didn't matter, and I wasn't about to let this unexpected gift turn into a tragedy. So the very next morning, I searched online for how to claim a jackpot safely. Every article repeated the same advice: find a lawyer and a financial advisor first. I wrote down a few names and eventually decided to contact a law firm in Manhattan known for handling large lottery cases. A few days later, I walked into a gleaming glass building, my heart pounding as the old ticket rested in my pocket. Sitting across from me in the conference room was Carol Anderson, an attorney and financial advisor with over 20 years of experience. She looked to be in her 50s, her graying hair tied neatly back, her voice firm yet warm. "The very first thing you need to understand," she said, looking me straight in the eye, "is that you must not let your family or friends know about this money until you have a plan to protect it. A sum like this will make you a target." I nodded, feeling both fearful and reassured at the same time. Over a series of meetings, Carol guided me step by step. She advised me that instead of taking yearly installments, I should opt for the lump sum, but through a trust set up in my name to keep my identity protected. She helped me assemble a team of investment professionals to create a long-term plan. Part into government bonds, part into secure stocks, and a portion kept liquid as cash reserves. Every number, every clause, she explained carefully. I took notes diligently, for the first time feeling that my future was truly in my own hands, no longer dictated by anyone else. On the day I officially signed the claim, Carol stood beside me, carefully checking each document. I can still remember the feeling of the pen gliding across the contract, as though I was writing a new destiny for myself. When I walked out of that building, I wasn't holding one of those oversized lottery checks you see splashed across the news, but a simple sheet of paper, a confirmation of funds. Yet it carried the heaviest meaning. From this moment on, I was no longer the exhausted girl scraping by on late-night shifts. The very first thing I did was pay off my crushing student loans. I logged into my bank account, clicked the button to settle the full balance, and watched the screen flash the words, "Paid in full." Tears rolled down my cheeks again, but this time they came from pure relief. For years I had lived under the constant shadow of debt, carefully stretching every paycheck just to make minimum payments. Now, that burden was gone. Immediately after, I submitted my resignation from the marketing firm. I thanked them sincerely for the opportunity, but inside, I knew I had turned a page. My life was no longer confined to survival, it was opening into something entirely new. Still, I refused to let myself squander it. Carol reminded me over and over again that true wealth isn't about showing off, but about keeping it quiet and managing it wisely. I listened. I moved from the cramped apartment in Brooklyn to a luxury apartment in Manhattan with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city skyline. It was spacious, modern, with a study and a fully equipped kitchen. But I never posted it online, never bragged to anyone. Each morning, I sat by the window with a cup of coffee, watching the sunrise paint the skyscrapers red, my heart filled with a peace I had never dared to dream of before. I made myself a promise, a clear boundary I would never break. No one in my family will ever use a single dollar of this money. They had chosen favoritism, they had chosen to abandon me. Now, they would live with that choice. This money was not meant to patch up injustice, nor to buy their approval. It was for me, for the future I would build, and for the people truly worthy of help. I began sketching long-term plans, setting aside a portion of the funds to support underprivileged students, those like me who once had to work themselves to exhaustion just for the chance to study. I hadn't announced anything yet, but the idea had already taken root in my heart, a way to turn my pain into hope for someone else. At night, sitting alone in my new apartment, I often thought back to the past, to the lottery ticket once dismissed as a joke. If I had thrown it away that day, I would probably still be scrubbing dishes in a diner, collapsing onto my desk with swollen eyes from sleepless nights. But life had shifted, not because of my parents' love, but because of my resilience and a strange stroke of chance they had never valued. I knew the storm wasn't over. Sooner or later, my family would realize I was no longer living in poverty. And when that day came, they would come looking, demanding, trying to cling to me. But I was ready. I had a plan, I had boundaries. And this time, I would not back down. I would protect what was mine, to the very end. The months that followed, I lived a life I had once only imagined. No more fear of debt, no more draining late-night shifts. I spent my time on myself, reading, taking short courses, sometimes wandering the streets of Manhattan just to feel the pulse of the city. I kept my promise, no waste, no boasting, no letting my family know about the money. But fate always finds a way to reveal the very things we try hardest to keep hidden. One weekend morning, I decided to take my new Tesla out for a drive. I had meant to keep it in the garage and continue commuting by subway as usual, but the weather was beautiful that day, and I wanted to treat myself. I stopped at a small cafe near Central Park. To my surprise, among the customers there was someone I recognized. Mrs. Mitchell, our old neighbor from Columbus, a woman infamous for her love of gossip. She spotted me, her face lighting up with excitement. "Eleanor, you live in New York, and you're driving a Tesla? That's wonderful. You must be doing well now, aren't you?" I forced a polite smile, gave her a vague reply, but inside, I knew that this news would reach Ohio faster than any plane. Sure enough, less than a week later, my mother called. It had been ages since she last phoned me, but this time her voice carried an uncharacteristic sweetness. "Eleanor, how have you been? I miss you so much. Your father and I were talking with Emily, and we think it's time for the family to come together again. Could you come home for a visit?" I stayed silent for a few seconds, tasting the artificiality in every word. My parents had never missed me. If not for those rumors, they would still be pretending I didn't exist. That same afternoon, I received a text from Emily. She had never once reached out to me on her own, but this time the words on my screen made me laugh bitterly. "I heard you're doing pretty well these days. I'm planning to open my own boutique, I just need some starting capital. You'll help me, won't you?" Think of it as sisters supporting each other. I stared at her message, remembering all the times she had mocked me for not being good enough to deserve help. And now, she was the one holding out her hand. I typed back one short line, sharp as a blade and dripping with irony. "So now I'm the special one, huh?" There was no reply right away. But that evening, my father called. His voice sounded stiff, forced. "Eleanor, your mother and I know that maybe in the past, we weren't always fair, but you're our daughter. Family is still family. Come home this weekend for dinner, let's talk things through." I sat in my quiet apartment, listening to every word. I was no longer the child starving for praise. I had everything I needed to stand on my own. Yet still, bitterness welled up inside me. They only came to me now because they smelled money. The next day, another call came, this time from Emily herself. Her voice was all bright laughter, feigning warmth. "Sis, the family's having dinner this weekend, please come home." It's been so long since we've talked properly. I really want us to be close again. I could hear the falseness in every laugh, every word. If I were still struggling with part-time jobs and drowning in debt, would Emily ever have wanted us to be close again? I sat in silence for a long time after hanging up the phone. Old memories came rushing back. The worn-out backpack I carried at 12, the shared birthday cakes where my name was squeezed into a forgotten corner, the parties where I stood on the sidelines while Emily basked in the spotlight. I remembered my graduation day, the lottery ticket handed to me like a cruel joke, Emily's mocking smile, my mother's voice saying, "Try your luck, sweetheart." All of it crashed into me at once, leaving me breathless. And now, when luck had truly turned my life around, they suddenly came back, pretending nothing had ever happened. I decided I would attend the dinner not because I hoped for reconciliation, but because I wanted to face the truth head-on. I wanted to see what they would say when confronted with an Eleanor who was no longer poor, no longer desperate for scraps of affection. I wanted to hear the words come from their own mouths, so that I could end it all on my own terms. That night, while packing, my eyes fell on the old lottery ticket pressed between the pages of my journal. I brushed my fingers over the numbers, a faint smile tugging at my lips. Once they had given it to me as a sign of contempt. Now it was the very reason they pretended to miss me. I closed the journal and whispered to myself, "All right then, if they want to meet, I'll show them who Eleanor Hart is now." Later that evening, I boarded a late flight back to Columbus. On the taxi ride from the airport to Emily's house, I stared out the window at the familiar streets of my childhood, blurred beneath the glow of streetlights. Every corner, every row of trees carried memories of favoritism and injustice. But this time, I wasn't the little girl waiting for scraps of love. I was coming back as someone entirely different, ready to confront them without fear. Emily's house appeared before me, a newly built mansion in a wealthy suburb, white-painted walls, massive glass windows, a driveway paved with gleaming stones. Golden light poured from inside, making it look like a miniature castle. I stepped in, my heels clicking softly against the marble floor. My parents stood at the entrance, their faces stretched into forced smiles. "Eleanor, you're home," my mother exclaimed, moving in for a brief hug that felt far colder than the warmth she tried to display. My father only nodded, his eyes scanning me from head to toe as if to confirm whether the rumors of my transformation were true. The dining table stood in the center of the living room, draped in pristine white linen, candles flickering, plates of steak, salad, and red wine meticulously arranged. Emily sat at the head of the table, dressed in a sparkling evening gown, her hair styled to perfection, smiling like the queen of the night. "So you came," she said, her voice sweet yet laced with arrogance. "Sit down, we have a lot to discuss." After a few minutes of awkward small-talk questions about my work, comments about how thin I looked, endless praise for Emily's beauty and success, the conversation shifted to its true purpose. My father set his wine glass down, his voice turning firm. "Eleanor, we'll be direct. Now that you're stable, now that you have the means, it's time to think about family. Emily is preparing for her wedding, and the costs aren't small. She also wants to expand this house, plus there are some credit card debts. You can help us with that, can't you?" Those words hung in the air like a blade cutting through the silence. I stared at them, feeling both bitter amusement and sorrow rise within me. All that supposed longing, all those warm invitations to come home, had been nothing more than a prelude to the real issue: money. I set my glass down, my voice low but steady. When I was in college, who helped me? When I worked 3 jobs just to pay tuition, who stood by me? My mother faltered for a second, then quickly regained her sugary tone. "That was to make you stronger, we wanted to toughen you up." A hollow laugh escaped me. That wasn't training. That was abandonment. It was leaving me to fight alone while Emily had everything handed to her. The air around the table grew heavy. Emily, unable to stand the silence, cut in with her mocking tone. "You've always been jealous. All your life, you've refused to admit that I was better. And now, even with money, you're still petty, too small-minded to be generous with your own family." I turned to her, my eyes calm, my voice deliberate, each word sharp. At least I don't live off our parents like a child who refuses to grow up. I paid my debts. I studied on my own. I stood up on my own 2 feet. And you? What do you have, other than spending money that was never yours? Emily froze, her lips trembling as if to argue, but no sound came out. My mother panicked. Eleanor, don't say that, she's still your sister. My father's brow furrowed, his hand gripping the wine glass so tightly his knuckles turned white. The entire dinner table felt frozen, as if time itself had stopped. No more laughter, no more empty pleasantries. Just the harsh clatter of cutlery against plates echoing in the silence. I looked around at each face, the anger burning in my father's eyes, the unease flickering in my mother's, the humiliation etched across Emily's expression. In that moment, I felt the invisible boundary between myself and this family as clearly as if it were carved in stone. I had crossed into another world, one they could no longer control, no longer belittle. They could try to paint the illusion of family love, but the truth was undeniable. To them, I had only ever been a tool to get what they wanted. I leaned back in my chair and gave a faint smile. You want me to help Emily? Tell me honestly, have you ever once thought of helping me? Number. Because in your eyes, I was never special enough. But I'm sorry. I'm no longer the naive child waiting for scraps of affection. No one spoke another word. The grand room, bright with chandeliers, felt colder than ice, suffocating in its silence. The entire dinner table sat frozen, as though every voice had been ripped from their throats. And I knew this was only the beginning of the real confrontation, the moment where I would finally draw the line and end the long years of being belittled. I remained seated for a moment longer, glancing around at the lavish table. The flickering candles, the delicate clink of cutlery, the rich scent of expensive wine, everything looked luxurious, yet inside I felt only emptiness. This wasn't a family dinner. It was a trial in disguise, staged to demand and to exploit. And I was done playing my part. I drew a deep breath and slowly stood. The chair scraped against the floor, its sharp sound cutting through the stillness, drawing every eye to me. I looked at them, my father, my mother, Emily, faces I knew so well, now distorted by disappointment and deceit. My voice rang out, firm and cold. Family is not an excuse to exploit. I've endured enough. For years, I stood on my own, fought on my own. What do I owe you, except scars? My mother flinched, her lips trembling. Eleanor, what are you saying? We're family, you can't just turn your back. From my bag, I pulled out a blank check. The pristine paper gleamed under the lights. I placed it on the table before them. Emily's eyes lit up instantly, convinced that I would finally sign it, finally play the obedient daughter and sister. But instead of reaching for a pen, I gripped the paper firmly and tore it to shreds. Piece after piece fluttered onto the table and floor, the sound of ripping paper slicing through the tension. This, I said slowly, my gaze steady on each of them, is my answer. Not 1 cent of what I have will ever fall into your hands. Because you never saw me as a daughter or a sister. You only ever saw a wallet to drain. The room fell into a heavy silence. Emily's face burned crimson, her eyes glaring at me in fury. She shot to her feet, screaming, "You're insane. You have all that money and you won't share? You've always been jealous of me, and now you're just taking revenge like this?" My mother burst into sobs, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Eleanor, don't do this. Don't be so cruel. We're still family." My father slammed his hand against the table, the wineglass rattling violently. "Enough. If you walk out that door, don't ever come back. Don't you dare call us again." His voice thundered with rage, but as I looked into his eyes, I didn't see strength. I saw desperation. I looked at them one last time, and my heart no longer trembled. A calmness washed over me, as if an invisible chain had finally snapped. Without another word, I turned and walked away. The sound of my heels striking the marble floor echoed through the suffocating silence of the room. Behind me, Emily's voice cracked in desperation. "Eleanor, come back. You can't just leave me like this." My mother sobbed, calling my name again and again. My father shouted, his voice harsh and threatening. But I didn't look back. Not once. Not ever again. The heavy doors closed behind me, shutting out their cries, their tears, their anger. Outside, the night air brushed against my face, cool and liberating, carrying with it a freedom I had never known. Step by step, I felt the weight of 23 years lift from my shoulders. On the ride back to my hotel, I stared out the taxi window as the city lights streamed past. A strange mix of sorrow and relief swelled inside me. I had spent my whole life waiting for their approval, for a word of praise, for a genuine embrace. But now I understood I didn't need it anymore. I didn't need their recognition to know my worth. I spent my whole life waiting for them to acknowledge me. I whispered to myself, but now I acknowledge myself. And in that moment, I realized that cutting ties wasn't a loss, it was a beginning. I was no longer the child begging for one-sided love. I had become a free woman, and my life would be written by me, and me alone. After walking out of that family dinner, I never looked back again. Their screams, their scolding, their condemning stares, all of it remained locked behind those doors, while I stepped forward onto a new path. For the first time in my life, I felt truly free. And that freedom came not just from the money I had, but from the clear, resolute decision to draw a boundary with the very people who had caused me the deepest pain. I began living the life I once only dreamed of. I traveled to the places I had longed to see but thought impossible. I stood in Paris beneath the Eiffel Tower, gazing up at the European sky. I walked the old streets of Kyoto, breathing in the scent of cherry blossoms in spring. I sat on a Hawaiian beach, listening to the waves crash gently on the sand, and for the first time, I felt completely at peace. Each journey was a way of healing an old wound, filling it with new, radiant memories. But I didn't just travel, I learned. I enrolled in short courses on investing, languages, and art. I read more, wrote more, and allowed myself to experience what my stifled childhood had once denied me. I attended seminars, met people with the same drive, and discovered just how vast the world really was. I was no longer the small Eleanor Hart, living in Emily's shadow. I had become someone else entirely strong, free, and full of aspiration. But more than anything, I chose to invest in the community. I remembered all too clearly how desperate I had once been, juggling 3 jobs just to pay tuition. I remembered the sting of watching friends with parents who supported them, while I relied only on my own hands and sleepless nights. I didn't want anyone else to go through that. So I created a scholarship fund called Shine On, dedicated to students from struggling families who still longed to chase their dreams. I never revealed my identity when donating. I supported quietly, because for me, happiness didn't come from being praised, but from seeing others given a chance. My new life made me calmer with each passing day. I learned how to let go of expectations that no longer served me. My parents and Emily had no place in my plans anymore. They still existed somewhere back in Ohio, dealing with their own problems, while I had stepped into an entirely new chapter. But life has a strange way of circling back. One late autumn afternoon, as I was strolling down Fifth Avenue in New York, I suddenly heard a familiar voice behind me. "Eleanor?" I turned, and there stood Emily. She wore a designer dress, but her face looked tired, her eyes glimmering with something between envy and longing. She glanced me over at the bag on my arm, the watch on my wrist, and finally, at the quiet smile on my face. You look so different," Emily said softly, her voice betraying her jealousy. "You must be so happy now, aren't you?" I smiled, no bitterness left in me, only a lightness spreading through my chest. "Money doesn't define me, freedom defines me." Emily froze, her lips parting but no words coming out. In that moment, I saw the true distance between us. Not the distance of wealth, but of spirit. She could own everything money could buy through others, but she would never know the freedom I carried within me. I turned away and kept walking, leaving her standing there, lost in the crowd of the busy street. I no longer felt anger nor sorrow. Only pity followed by release. One summer morning, I sat on the porch of the lake house I had recently bought in the suburbs of New York. It was simple, not ostentatious, but filled with light. A small garden bloomed with lavender, and a wooden deck faced out toward a deep blue lake. I brewed a hot cup of coffee, sat down in a wicker chair, and watched the water ripple under golden sunlight. Birds sang, the wind moved gently through the trees, and together they created a melody of peace one I had never heard during my unjust childhood. I remembered it all. The worn-out gifts, the constant comparisons, the nights I cried silently, the lottery ticket dismissed with contempt, the dinner laced with mockery, and the decision to cut ties. It all felt like a film that had already ended, leaving me only with the present peaceful, free, and strong. A single phrase echoed in my mind, clear as if whispered in my ear. Cutting off the toxic isn't selfish, it's saving yourself. I took a sip of coffee and smiled. Yes, I had saved myself. I no longer needed my family's validation because I had learned to validate myself. If you are listening to this story, perhaps you too have been hurt by your own family. Perhaps you were abandoned, compared, or made to feel like you were never enough. I want you to know this: you are not alone, and more importantly, you have the right to rewrite your own story. You have the right to set boundaries, the right to walk away from toxicity, and the right to seek freedom and happiness for yourself. Family may have given you life, but they do not define you. Money may come and go, but your true worth lies in your courage to stand up, to walk away from what causes you pain, and to step boldly onto your own path. And if one day you must choose between continuing to endure or saving yourself, remember my words. Cutting off the toxic isn't selfish, it's saving yourself. You deserve a life that is whole, a life you hold the pen to, from beginning to end.